So Dom, let's talk briefly about consumers, because I know we're doing the YouGov poll in the UK, which will be 2,000 consumers, asking questions about whether they know that there's an impact. And I've found fascinating, and I've shared with both of you, that I'll talk to very well-educated people in the part of the country I live in, doctors, nurses, and when I say, hey, did you know that streaming consumes energy? At first they're shocked because they're like, well, my mobile phone has a battery in it. Okay, sure, I have to charge it. I get that. The very next question they ask is, what can we do as consumers to do anything about it? And one of the things I have to sort of say to them is, they're like, can we turn off our Wi-Fi access router at night? I'm like, yeah, but the bits are still being transited across the network. So one of the points we're trying to get to is thinking about what the industry can do, right? Yeah. As opposed to what consumers can do.
So first and foremost, we as an industry have to assume that the consumer is going to do nothing. Different. And in fact, correct. We have to assume that the consumer is going to demand more from us as an industry.
And as a matter of fact, I can't remember if it was after your BBC piece that you were in or one of the broadsheets, people were putting messages like, don't take my streaming away from me, you commie, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I want to commit suicide in my own industry, but there's, honestly, acronyms longer than the 3 letters, it doesn't matter. So yes, the consumer, we have to assume they're going to do nothing, if not get worse. They're going to want more content. They're going to care less about how we deliver it to them. So we as an industry have to solve this problem.
Okay.
That's just something we've got to take on the chin. We can't, we've had members in working groups in Greening and Streaming talking about green button, giving socially responsible consumers the option to opt into there's typically a trade-off with quality against energy. So opt into a lower quality experience, but clean your soul because it's now using less energy.
Right.
Those are important options to provide. It's like the eco mode that everyone turns off on day one when they own a TV.
Right.
They're important options to provide. They're an anathema to all the other conversation we have about best quality of experience for the consumer. So that's something we've just got to take on the chin. So we've got to take ownership of that problem. And I mean, we have got to take ownership of that problem. One of the things that drove me to really get Greening and Streaming off the ground, and this is where we get into how big is the problem. Peter mentioned a 1% statistic. Actually, it's probably bigger than that. The Shift report itself was way skewed. But the comparison for our industry's energy demand, when you look from a top-down rather than a data attribution model, is our companies are creating a demand for around 3% of world energy at the moment. Okay, that's because of the telco largely. Yes, the CDN's a big part of that, the streaming demand and the growth, they all drive into that. But the people in this room largely could make decisions which could maybe conjecturally take 10, 20% off that 3%. That's a significant saving. You go to the aviation industry, which is also around 3% of world energy, and get 500 people in a room to act to maybe take 10, 20% off that energy scope, and it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. Our industry is still young enough, and we're still a small enough community that we feel we can make significant energy impact at this scale. So,
and I'll give an example from in the past in another industry, the cable industry, of course, had set-top boxes that had hard drives. I was tasked on a Department of Energy project about 10 years ago to sort of look at, could we lower power consumption on set-top boxes? Because it turned out all the set-top boxes in the US accounted for 3 nuclear power stations. That's a lot of power. It turns out what standby mode was just dimming the LED on the front of the set-top box. Nothing actually went into sleep mode. And the reason was consumers did not want to wait 2 seconds for the drive to spin back up. What was also fascinating was, even though those were DVRs, 65% of the people who actually came back to their television weren't coming back to watch something on the same channel. So, AKA TiVo, they were actually going to switch to a different channel. So that entire hard drive got, essentially that content got dumped because it was useless.
So I wanted to just, because you've mentioned the YouGov poll, one of the other questions we are asking of the general public is, we make a lot of assumptions because we compete with each other, that lower latency, higher quality are the maxims. We need to actually keep checking where good enough is for the consumer, because what we average as our pre-positioned content, what we average as our mean target, actually, even going back to Peter's comment about AVC earlier. H.264 is still good enough for most people. AV1 might be much better, might have loads more features, might be lower bandwidth, whatever it may be, but H.264 is still good enough for most people. So is 2K. Yeah, so we assume, because with the internet, we want to make all these higher end capabilities ready for instant on. But actually, if you said to the 32K UHD 480 frame a second consumer, you might have to wait 4 seconds because we're not going to pre-position this content. You can have it, the environment's dynamic, but you're going to have to wait because you're not the statistical average. We don't have to pre-cache content and grow those caches and power those caches just by setting a bit of expectation with the consumer. So
I think we
these are
should have
complicated conversations.
4 seconds of playing Staying Alive from the Bee Gees as they wait. And then at least they know that we're trying to do something.